Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, for this nice invitation to the EACN workshop. And thank you, dear Yannis. Now, today we heard a lot about scientific development in quantum physics and quantum communication. And now we regard of how things could go into March and about different concepts behind high-tech entrepreneurial activities in the German market, as it is written, but as well in the Anglo-Saxon market. And we see how differences in history lead to different forms of entrepreneurial activities. Now, start with slide number one. One sentence to myself. I'm a professor for business communication in Munich in the International School of Management, and very into the development of scientific development into businesses. And how did everything start in this last century? The flights of Brothers Wright or Konrad Zuse's Z3. Did things happen because people invented something, or did things happen because they were sponsored? Well, any historic entrepreneurial start had and has many obstacles to solve, and these often upcoming obstacles are not predictable. What is predictable, though, if you look back in history, is that economy is mainly driving science, even if it is the science that always starts, but it takes time until economy adopts that. Why is that? Help economy and economy helps you. If you develop an environment where your scientific research can fit into, then you should really develop as well this environment. This is the short story. History shows that both an operation network, but as well a public interest are needed in any era, let it be an aristocracy or democracy, that doesn't matter. Because research means progress, and pioneer mentality is the common denominator of economy and science both. So if you search the common denominator, meaning that your invention, your science, your development fits into a bigger shape, into a bigger background, into a bigger context, then you will achieve the needed awareness. And this awareness is always great and much more aware and much more conscious if there is a time of disruption. What does that mean? Disruption means that a period of economy, a period of welfare, a period of any kind of development stops immediately for different reasons, for social development, for scientific or economic development. And then you've got a big awareness where you can plug in your themes and your topics. For instance, we take the Renaissance so that you can see that this is nothing modern. This happens always in mankind. The Europeans in the 15th century lost their faith, the Christian faith in that kind, doubting that a religion that could not help against pandemia, war, and hunger led to the fact that church lost its power. Didn't control the people any longer because the church didn't have answers. So where are the answers? The aristocracy, the kings, they knew to avoid the plague, to avoid weakness and destruction, it is time for a change. So why not changing something in wisdom? The hunger for wisdom and science had to be distributed to the general public, not reserved any longer exclusively for a few abbeys. Prague, Paris, Vienna, big cities where the first universities in Europe were opened to the public and not just to a few. It is time for disruption. Disruptions accelerate science and technology. The circumstances in Johannes Gutenberg's era, here in the picture on the right, led to his success and the economical demand. The context always decides on the acceleration of progress, whether it be a war, a conflict such as the pest, a crisis that hit Europe since 1347, the Reformation by Martin Luther, invented in, this is a mistake, 1417, not of course it is 1517 in Wittenberg in Germany, and then discovering the American continent by Christopher Columbus in 1492. This all, if you can see it, has happened in a very close distance of time. So people were totally disrupted and totally abstracted from what has ruled them several hundred years before. There's one Europe, there's one church, there's one faith, there's one economy, a few people who write, a few people who distribute, and that's it. And then within a few years or decades, everything gets into move. In the end, it's always a socio-economic context that provokes a disruptive process, led by or led into technological change. An example, the thesis from Martin Luther would have led him into crucifixion just a few years ago. But Henry VIII in England, as well as the pest that didn't cope with the formal wisdom of the church's science, and many factors more, led to the fact that Luther could be heard. Economy then, because it needs capital to produce goods on a larger scale, follows. The social development, because any human being wants to achieve freedom, follows either. And technology helps to fulfill freedom because it saves time. Then you can plug in, like Johannes Gutenberg, your invention. Then it brings money. Anyhow, time is money, and Gutenberg's machine of book printing is saving a lot of money and time because it distributes and develops books onto a larger scale much more quicker. Remember the first shift into modern technology, the Gutenberg book print? It led as well to information. Remember the second shift into modern technology, the steam machine, the car. It was the wish and the best practice of the automatization of work progresses, saving the time of the people working with it. These disruptions accelerate, again, science and technology. Look to America and its markets in Europe. On the right, you see a picture of Mr. Fugger, which is a big commerceman in the 15th century. Jacob the Rich, he was named. Why? Now, obviously, economy became more powerful than church, because economy, the first time, became richer than church. A clear result of the many disruptions mentioned before. Faith doesn't feed was a proverb in that time, saying that commercemen like the Fugger in Germany had one aim: become more powerful. The market dominion means power. Power needs information. Information needs money. Scientific progress saves money. The result? The science decides the market position. If the market needs new technology, now it's your turn. It is the very first time in history that commercemen, well, in modern history, since the Roman Empire, better said, that the European businessmen, the European commercemen could really provoke technical development because they feeded them with their own capital. It was the first time it was not capital by the kings and no capital by the church. It was private equity the very first time. Powerful people could order printed information thanks to Johannes Gutenberg. Maps were needed for the discoveries overseas, graphics of plants and seeds of the Americas were set for pharmacy, prints from portraits like the Medici or Fugger were distributed to connect business partners. Information means progress. In short, the prints in the 15th century had the same value like the internet and of the 20th century: to develop and to distribute quick and fast information. This led several hundred years later to the next step in German history of private equity. The industrial evolution. The late industrialization in Germany in the 19th century changed the financial aid of science. In 1871, the Prussian king received lots of compensation funds after a successful war or wars against the three defeated countries, Austria, Denmark, and France. This led then to the German Empire, and the Prussian king became the German emperor. This money from these countries came together with new industries, the exports of locomotives, steel performances, etc., and economical success. So the German Reich, when it was founded, took position in overseas colonies, thanks to lots of money, and became an economical power on a global scale. Now the so-called middle class grew and the industrial capitalism became powerful. The result, as it is here on the right on this stamp, 175 years Eisenbahn, Linde, Mercedes, AEG, Thyssen, Krupp, all these big companies founded by engineers, by upper middle class performers and academic entrepreneurs. That was the first time in German history that companies from that size were founded by private equity. Now, the strong bonds between science universities and industry became even stronger. By the end of World War I in 1918, the most important investments into science came by private, not by public equity. In a nutshell, the academic class was performed by middle-class people who became engineers, who became doctors, who became famous in their work. Thanks to that, they could prove that their inventions worked. They received money from other fabricants, from other merchants, and could produce this money for their own company like Mercedes-Benz. In the end, their sons and daughters studied as well, and they knew the more you study, the more you keep research, the more the equity stays in our family, and we can perform and widespread our company. This is Germany. Now have a look in the United States. Entrepreneurs are there because the United States were taking what the English began under Henry VIII, the discovery of the ego. Now, by ego is not meant a selfish productiveness or some egocentric world. No, it's meant that the ego, in the sense of the Renaissance, meant to develop itself. What can you do in your own life as a man and do with your own hands and with your own wisdom and your own approach? This desire for freedom, this development of the ego, stems from the shift of power towards the bourgeoisie, towards a worldly mundane search, and now they pursued for happiness, which can be decided by information advantage, by one's own skill, and not, as before, by status, faith, providence, or inheritance. That was over. The young United States in the 19th century became that powerful because they promised and promoted this desire of the ego. Those who see global developments and can provide global answers to global questions will lead industrial adaptation of key technologies such as quantum communication here, or in the case of Elon Musk, Tesla, SpaceX, battery technology, satellite technology. If you really can tell people what your invention, what your company does for mankind, then you can receive a lot of private equity in the United States. This picture right shows the Brothers Wright, Orwell and Wilbur in South Carolina. And they knew that information is gold, information secures freedom, so they had to know and to study everything about aviation. The US economist, philosopher, and digital entrepreneur Jeremy Rifkin, 100 years later, predicted in his standard work Access, which was published in 2000 already, that information is the new gold, and rather networking with information. Here we may resume the most important pattern that connects European history of science since the Middle Ages, and as well as the American pattern of history of science. It is disruption and context accelerate both technological progress. The Brothers Wright were at the right time in the right place. They were in the right time when America became great, when the United States became more powerful. They needed oil for their car industry, which was already starting. They started on a broad scale with electricity. They needed planes to ship goods over this big continent. They came really in the right context. Look at Leonardo da Vinci, who was in the wrong time with the right context, but not in the time where nobody understood what he was really working on, even if he was protected by kings and friends. And Galileo, meanwhile, he was not protected by nobody. He was exactly in the right time, but in the wrong place. Note, any technological disruption, another commercial law, is the visible outcome of a former socio-economic disruption, of a social transformation. To end this and to sum it up, the Wilburs on Orwell's Wrights did their fine, fantastic work on aviation process because they really were in the end of a social transformation of the young United States, while other people like Leonardo da Vinci, who may have thought about the same ideas, they were simply too early or on the wrong place. Then came, a bit later, Konrad Zuse, the Second World War, the Enigma machine, and Alan Turing, who defeated it. Then Benoit Mandelbrot with IBM and the fractal antenna. Computer science became step by step more successful because it saves both time and information. And the consequence is that today big tech means big business. Look how cryptocurrency and decentralized finance changed politics worldwide. The outlook is that this unity of economy, technology, information is comparable to the Renaissance. We live, in a way, 500 years later after Gutenberg in a second Renaissance. This means it has never been easier to set up a company out of your research progress than now. Less political restriction and more private equity worldwide. We have more players than ever before. There's not just the Europeans and the Americans, there's as well the Chinese, the Indians, and many forces more, the Australians, whoever. The options are that the Anglo-Saxon world is market-driven, and it stays like this, while the EU subsidies, which are a lot, are politically driven. It still is easier to receive subsidies than private equity in Germany, and vice versa in Anglo-Saxon countries. Now check whether your company fits into which context. If you are still in research or are you still entrepreneuring. Both worlds, let it be the Anglo-Saxon or the German world, need different skills in different contexts. This comes from history. Now, after all the theory makes something practice to come a bit more to the end, there is a case study which I want to show you, which is the story of XIQ and NQ. Now, what does that mean? XIQ is a software which was produced by a company called Stadtwerk, where I was the communication manager. And XIQ, the software today, supplies, here on the right, more than 1.5 million European consumers, private consumers on the B2B scale, which is powered by the mother company Stadtwerk. It is supporting with its software European energy suppliers. What does our product, in short? It leads to efficient power supply, especially in smart grids. And then the image contents, which we developed, shows our environment, the work, the family life, what power supply really does to help us. Why that? Because you see it on the right. It's really easy to write a diagram for an engineer what the XIQ software does, but it's not really nice to tell to people what it is, because you simply cannot see it. And this leads us to the following problem. What is the color of electricity? Because our main product is electricity supply. On the right, you see the logo of XIQ. The software here is the company that invented it, of mathematician and engineer Mr. Ami Ayazi, one of the two business managers. And here on the right, you see the cover of the so-called portfolio in the internet, saying that there is system process development in the energy market. Now, how do we transport this? How do we say that we are dealing with electricity on a private equity? And what does our software do? This is quite difficult to communicate if you just say what it looks like. You have to do it like this way. You have to tell the people what it does. So the topics in our news blog that we invented are debates around energy policy, here in the middle, electricity prices, energy transition, renewable energies, 10 years ago. We need daily discourse, we need daily politics and daily dialogue. Then we need the target group. In that case, we decided that our target group for our software, for our product, are politicians. So this here on the right is Mr. State Secretary Rainer Barker from Germany, from the BMWI, the Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy, in the year 2013. We were inviting him to a panel and talking about our network activities, and he was answering that electricity market ensures media security of supply. We need more developments like yours in energy IT. This voice led, of course, to media, to press, to more politicians. There came people from other parties. This politician is in support of the Green Party. We had another people from any kind of the democratic spectrum in our panels. And this is because we feeded them with ideas, with our developments, and they feeded the media with what we are doing. So it was like a strategy of widespreading the message. Identify a target group. As I said, in Germany, it is the state which gives subsidies. It is the state that decides who gives money into smart grids, into power supplies. So therefore, even if you are talking with private equity, you have to talk to the state, which means to the public, to the politicians, to the press. Then, if this comes second step, then you can show what XIQ, the software, does in the market. This is PR. This is what we show to our partners in politics and funding. How to make money by sustainability and supporting solutions such as apps, the XIQ, or doing this dialogue with politicians and economy by news blogs. So that we did with Enquiry. That was the name of the news blog. The proof of concept, POC. Stadtwerk, the mother company, enables the Enquiry newsroom and enlarges our own ecosystem. Our newsroom, our dialogue, became so strong that we opened up the permanent dialogue with journalists in the energy sector. From the selection of topics to direct contact with journalists, we designed our media work from a single source, from our company. This guarantees that our information fits to high journalistic standards, and this guarantees as well that the journalists come asking us what we are talking and contributing to the energy market. The journalists transport it to the politicians, and there we receive more funds and subsidies to develop more products. The message has to be quite simple. This was our message for years: carbon age ready to perdition. The bigger picture is renewables are supported by our daughter company NQ.de, which supplies power, electric power by wind and solar energy. So you see here in the picture some lorries transporting carbon, coal by train, and it's leading to nowhere. This was quite simple. And this picture was easy. The message was, e.g., we are transporting sustainable solutions. But this is not the real message. The message is what really changes, and we are talking about disruption, is that the past is over. Now, this was the basic message. In the end, the past is a bevel in my shoe. The old conventional energy market is over. It's time for software that transports and connects sustainable resources and renewable energy. 4 years later, after we founded it in October 2017, NQ, XIQ, and Enquiry successfully merged after 5 years rollout. In short, NQ was sold to a Norwegian power supplier called Statkraft. XIQ stays in the mother company Stadtwerk, but we are licensing it. So we are copying it and distributing it worldwide. And Enquiry as well was sold to Statkraft as a news block. They adopted it into their ecosystem and received money for that. So we are staying with our company, but we are merging our message. Coming to the end, storytelling. Last slide. Storytelling is transporting message. And transporting message is the #1 reason here on the bottom of high-tech investment culture and resulting high-tech advantage of the USA compared to Germany. The more stories we can develop and adopt by TV, by cinema, by novels, the more tech development is facilitated and realized in the US. Why that? The United States are quite eager in transporting businesses into a storyline. And you can see here the storyline in this picture of Star Trek, the Star Trek universe, the timeline, and the author of Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry, who died in 1989, said once that in a very real sense, the quote here in the middle, we are all aliens on a strange planet. We spend most of our lives reaching out and trying to communicate. If during our lifetime we could reach out and really communicate with just 2 people, we are indeed very fortunate. Saying it is so hard to convince 1 person from your idea. Imagine you have to convince more. You have to put this in a bigger picture, in a bigger context. You should know when it is time for disruption. And if there is something like a movie, of course, like in Hollywood, Star Trek, that transport your message, easy. Now, this is United States, this is not Germany, but even in Germany it works. Transport your image in a bigger picture, in a bigger context. Wait on which scale of disruption your business is taking place in this whole bigger picture. Try to find the common denominator, and then you're in. Then you can convince people for public subsidies in Europe, in Germany. Now, thank you very much for your attention, and good luck and success. And of course, I'm quite eager to receive your requests for after this talk. Thank you very much.
Daniel, many thanks for this nice talk. As you know, we have our 2 standard questions that we ask first before we let everybody ask questions. So the first one is, what do you think will be the first use case for entanglement-assisted communication networks?
I think the first use case would be the what we already discussed about the bringing together of 5G into 6G technologies, because we really need more communicated network. We need more information to widespread it, and there is a big need for that, not just in space and aviation technologies, but as well in computer technologies. So that this would be I would say the jump from 5G to 6G is the first thing.
And do you see a major hurdle in your field?
In that example or in my field?
In this particular example, yes. And in your field.
The big hurdle will be, as always, of course, again, as I said, public discussions. So there will be how to say, even if the whole thing will be good, just if one party says it is good, that will automatically lead that another party on the political spectrum says it will be bad. And now develop this in whole Europe. So every country has to discuss. In the meantime, I'm definitely sure that China, the United States are even quicker. Not because they are more intelligent, but the decision ways, the paths to make a decision are even shorter. Sometimes it's easier to make a mistake and to say, whoops, we make it better, than years of discussion always jumping as the last passenger on the train.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.